There's some things that once you're older, you realize are only for the young. Like drinking multiple energy drinks or staying up all night. Enjoy it all because trust me, one day you're gonna wake up and your entire body's gonna be sore because you mowed the lawn yesterday. Make the most of this amazing time of your life because there are some things that you can only do while you're young. You know this. That's why you can get away with staying up so late even when you have to get up so early the next day. Hanging out with friends when you're supposed to be studying. Eating 10 bags of Takis and washing them down with 4 Red Bulls. Or listening to music and going to concerts and screaming your lungs out so loud that you can't even hear the person that's performing. Sending ridiculous memes to each other all night long, dressing up for spirit days, finding time for small adventures like meeting up and watching the sunset with friends. The point is, we all know there will be times in life that are not like this. Our friends won't live nearby. Our stepmom won't be buying all the groceries. So for now, let's make the most of the days where we're young. Last week, we started this series talking about a couple of guys who lived a long time ago. Their names were Paul and Timothy. Even though they lived a long time ago, we can actually have something in common with Timothy. He was young too. By the standards of the day, Timothy was young when Paul, who was the most influential Christian leader to ever live, invited him to lead others. See, Paul used to travel around and tell people about how Jesus died and came back to life. For a while, Timothy went on these trips with Paul. As they traveled, Paul mentored Timothy as a follower of Jesus and a leader until one day in a town called Ephesus, Paul put Timothy in charge of an entire church. So this meant that many other people, both young and old, would look to Timothy for leadership. And Timothy led. Paul would write him letters to encourage him and help him know how to lead well. Those letters are called 1st and 2nd Timothy, and we can find them in the New Testament in the Bible. Thankfully, you and I can read them and learn so much about what being young can be like for followers of Jesus. Check out this one statement that Paul makes that is the big idea of our entire series. Here's what he said. Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example for the believers in speech and conduct and love and faith and purity. Paul understood that Timothy wasn't a leader for later. He wasn't in a someday when you grow up, God will use you situation. No, God had something incredible and important for Timothy to do right then while he was still young. That's why he was adamant that Timothy shouldn't let anyone else look down on him or set a bar lower for him. Instead, he was supposed to set a positive example for those around him. In order to help him do this, Paul wrote some advice a little bit later in this letter that proves to be helpful for us today. Paul wraps up his first letter to Timothy, reminding him about a huge responsibility that he has. And he says, Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to your care. Turn away from godless chatter and opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge. There's been some debate about exactly what Paul was referring to when he says what has been entrusted to your care. But essentially he's saying, hey, Timothy, make sure that you represent the message of Jesus well to the people and the community around you. Make sure that the way you live, the way you lead, the way you conduct your personal life when no one is watching lines up with what you believe. Make sure that you keep people focused on what Jesus said was true about life, about God, and about what he says is best. In other words, Paul was saying, I want more for you than what's common, Timothy. It wouldn't make you a bad person if you did whatever you wanted with your years for being young. But I believe that God has something powerful for you to do right now. And what God has for you is too important for you to get distracted. See, here's the thing. The same is true for you. Maybe you've never thought of it this way, but God has a purpose for your time in high school. God isn't waiting for graduation or marriage or your career to use you to impact those around you. God has work for you to do right now. In fact, the work that God has for you in high school, you can only do while you're young. You're only young once, which means these years in high school, you will never get back. I highly doubt that God would just want you to wander through these years without experiencing anything significant or without helping others in significant ways. You have an amazing opportunity to change the course of the lives of people around you by serving them and encouraging them. If we're paying attention to Paul's advice, I think this mission is too important to get distracted by gossip, laziness, treating others poorly, wasting time, or living irresponsibly. Please hear me. This doesn't mean that you're not supposed to have fun, but it does mean that while you're having fun, it's important to remember that there are some things that you can accomplish only while you're in high school. You don't want to miss out on what God can do in and through you in your high school years. You get to decide what your years of being young will be about. By now, you know that these years can be really special. That is the only part of what we're talking about today. If you're really going to experience all that God has for you in high school, then it's important that you take Paul's advice seriously and put his words into action right now. This week, you can start living the life that is uniquely yours while you're young. Even if you're not sure about all this Jesus stuff, I would guess that you would want to get the most out of life, right? My guess is that you want your younger years to be some of your greatest years. Or whether you're still figuring out how to feel about all this church stuff, or if you've been following Jesus for a while, here's a couple steps that we can take in the right direction. First, ask God, what do you have for me? Spend some time thinking, praying, and maybe even journaling about what God might do through you in high school. How God might use you to impact your friends, your family, your teachers, older people, younger people, your community. What gifts has He given you? What influence do you have? Where has God placed you? Think about all those things and ask God to show you how God might want to use you to make an impact over these special years. Reach out to a trusted adult. They might be able to point out some potential stuff that you're struggling with seeing yourself. Jesus came so that you could have the best kind of life possible as a high schooler and forever. Would it be worth exploring more? Whether you're new to all of this or have been a Christian for a long time, take some time this week to ask God, what do you have for me? And then second, evaluate what you're currently up to. You can do this by asking yourself some really simple questions. How might my words, actions, habits, or friends be distracting me from what God has for me? I know that this is tough, but it's so important. Be honest with yourself. And if you have a hard time finding it, like I said, ask a trusted adult. They will help you through this. They will point stuff out in your life. This isn't about feeling shame or never having fun or suddenly dropping everybody from your life. But this is about evaluating the reality of your current high school experience so that you can begin to have the best high school experience possible, or even better, the best possible life ever. So evaluate what you're currently up to and begin to head in the direction of what God has for you. So when you decide to take these steps, you'll be deciding that what you want for your years of being young to be all about what God has for you. God is not waiting on you to grow up so that you can begin to experience what God has for you. No, God takes you seriously right now. So does every adult in this room. We believe that your generation is the best generation, and we've seen it. We've seen God do incredible things through you all. We believe that He is just getting started. We believe that you can impact your school, your community, your family in incredible ways, not just later, but right now. These years of your life can be full of impact. There are some opportunities and challenges that only happen while you're young. So when you're older, don't forget what this feels like. And I want you to remember that you get to decide where your years of being young will be all about.